I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who snooped through someone else's phone. But when you're sitting alone in your kitchen at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, staring at the glowing screen of a device that doesn't belong to you, morality feels like a distant concept, something for people who haven't had their entire world shaken. It all started earlier that evening when Sophia, my daughter-in-law, left her phone behind after one of her casual visits. She'd been spending more and more time at our house lately, claiming loneliness since James, my son, was always traveling for work. At first I didn't mind. In fact, I welcomed it. Sophia was young, vibrant, and brought life to this quiet home Henry and I had shared for 40 years. But then things began to change. The way she laughed too loudly at Henry's jokes, how she lingered just a little too long in his study during their business discussions, and those late-night cups of tea they seemed to share without me. It all added up to something I couldn't ignore anymore. When I picked up her phone from the counter where she'd carelessly left it, curiosity clawed at me like a wild animal desperate to escape its cage. I told myself it was harmless. I'd just check her messages, confirm my suspicions, and put the phone back before she noticed. But what I found shattered everything I thought I knew about my husband, my family, and even myself. There, buried among dozens of texts, were exchanges between Sophia and someone whose initials were simply H. The tone was flirtatious, intimate, almost nauseatingly sweet. One message stood out: "Can't wait to see you at the cabin tomorrow. You know how much I love watching the sunset with you." My heart sank into my stomach as realization hit me like a freight train. It wasn't some random man, it was Henry. My Henry. And suddenly the cracks in my perfect life weren't just visible. They were gaping holes threatening to swallow me whole. That night, sleep eluded me entirely. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of their secret conversations replaying in my mind like a twisted movie I couldn't turn off. By morning, exhaustion weighed heavily on my shoulders, but so did anger, a simmering rage that burned brighter with each passing hour. When Henry came downstairs for breakfast, humming an old tune as if nothing was wrong, I snapped. "Do you want to explain these?" I demanded, shoving Sophia's phone across the table toward him. His face went pale, and for a moment he looked like a child caught stealing cookies. He stammered, denying everything at first, accusing me of invading privacy, overreacting, being paranoid. But when I showed him the specific messages, the ones signed off with pet names only he would use, he crumbled. "It's not what it looks like," he pleaded, but the words felt hollow, meaningless. What hurt most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the lies. How could he sit across from me every evening, holding my hand while we watched TV, pretending everything was fine? Did he think I wouldn't notice? Or worse, did he assume I wouldn't care? I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. Instead, I swallowed my tears and waited for Sophia to return. She breezed back into the house later that afternoon, completely unaware of what I knew. "Oh, thank goodness you found my phone," she chirped, reaching for it with that practiced smile of hers. I handed it over silently, forcing myself to act normal, though inside I was seething. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next few days were a blur of tension and silence. Henry avoided me like the plague, retreating to his study or taking long walks around the neighborhood. Meanwhile, Sophia continued her charade, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. She even suggested we plan a family dinner for James, who was due to visit that weekend. "It'll be nice to have everyone together again," she said cheerfully, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. I nodded politely, biting back the venomous words that threatened to spill out. Inside, however, I was plotting. If they thought they could destroy my marriage and my family without consequences, they were dead wrong. On Friday evening, the day before James arrived, I decided it was time to confront them both. Dinner was tense, the air thick with unspoken accusations. As Sophia cleared the plates, I turned to Henry and said, "Tell me, darling, why exactly did you choose now to start having midlife crises? Was it because Sophia's younger, prettier, more interesting than your boring old wife?" Sophia froze mid-step, her eyes widening in shock. Henry's fork clattered against his plate as he sputtered, "Ellie, please, let's not do this here." But I wasn't done. "Oh no, Henry, I think it's high time we aired out the dirty laundry. Don't you agree, Sophia?" Her cheeks flushed red, and for the first time she looked genuinely rattled. The facade was cracking, and I intended to tear it down completely. After that disastrous dinner, the atmosphere in the house became unbearable. Sophia tried to smooth things over, offering weak excuses about misunderstandings and innocent friendships. But I wasn't buying it. Every word out of her mouth felt like another layer of deceit, and I resolved to dig deeper. I started paying closer attention to their interactions. The lingering glances, the whispered conversations, the way Sophia casually touched Henry's arm whenever she passed him. Each detail fueled my determination to expose the truth. I began following her when she left the house, trailing her car at a safe distance to see where she went. Most days she headed to her office or ran errands, but occasionally she drove to places I didn't recognize. A cafe downtown, a park near the river, and once a secluded cabin by the lake. One afternoon, while Sophia was meeting clients, I snuck into her car and planted a small GPS tracker under the seat. It felt wrong, invasive, but I justified it to myself as necessary. If she and Henry were truly innocent, then there would be nothing to hide. But deep down I already knew the answer. The evidence was piling up, and with each new discovery my resolve hardened. I wasn't just fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, my sanity, and the fragile remains of the life I'd built. By the end of the week, I had amassed enough information to piece together a disturbing picture. The GPS tracker revealed frequent trips to the lake cabin, often coinciding with Henry's supposed fishing outings. The texts on Sophia's phone painted an equally damning story, filled with coded language and promises of secrecy. But I needed more, something concrete, undeniable. That's when I remembered Sophia's laptop. She often left it at our house after working late, and I knew she trusted us enough not to suspect anything. Late one night, while everyone else was asleep, I crept into the guest room where she usually stayed and booted up her computer. Using a password generator I'd downloaded online, I cracked her account within minutes. What I found made my blood run cold. Her emails confirmed everything I feared. Detailed plans for meetings at the cabin, cryptic references to phase 2 of whatever scheme they were cooking up, and even receipts for hotel rooms booked under fake names. Worst of all was a draft email addressed to James, written in a tone dripping with manipulation. "You deserve better than this," it read. "Your parents are holding you back. Once you're free, we can finally build the future we've always dreamed of." My hands trembled as I read the words over and over, each sentence cutting deeper than the last. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated plan to tear my family apart. And I was going to stop it no matter the cost. The weight of what I'd uncovered pressed down on me like a lead blanket. Every piece of evidence pointed to one undeniable truth. Sophia wasn't just having an affair with Henry, she was plotting something far more sinister. And yet, despite the mountain of proof in front of me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump into chaos. For days I wrestled with how to confront them. Should I show James the emails? Should I expose everything at once and watch their carefully constructed lies crumble? Or should I bide my time, gathering even more ammunition before making my move? It was during Sunday dinner, a rare occasion when all 4 of us were together, that I finally snapped. Sophia had been particularly smug that evening, recounting some trivial story about her latest real estate deal while casually leaning against Henry's chair as if she owned him. The sight made my stomach churn. When she laughed and said, "Oh, by the way, Henry and I had such a lovely time at the lake last weekend," I couldn't hold back any longer. "Lovely time?" I echoed, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Is that what you call sneaking around behind everyone's backs? Planning secret meetings and lying through your teeth?" The room fell silent, the air thick with shock. Sophia's face paled, but she quickly recovered, trying to play it off as a misunderstanding. "Ellie, I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. I pulled out printed copies of the emails and slammed them onto the table. "Explain this, then." That night, after Sophia stormed out and Henry retreated to his study in shame, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the mess I'd created. My hands still trembled from the adrenaline coursing through my veins, but beneath the anger there was clarity. I realized something important. Exposing the truth wasn't enough. They needed to feel the full weight of their betrayal, the humiliation, the consequences, the pain they'd inflicted on me. It was time to take control, to turn the tables so completely that neither Sophia nor Henry would ever forget what they'd done. I called Maggie the next morning, needing someone to confide in. She listened patiently as I explained everything, her usual wit replaced with solemn concern. You can't let them get away with this, she said firmly when I finished. But be careful, Ellie. Revenge has a way of consuming people. Her words lingered in my mind as I began formulating a plan. First, I drafted anonymous letters to James, hinting at Sophia's infidelity without revealing too much. Then I planted subtle seeds of doubt between them, arranging for James to overhear incriminating conversations or find suspicious notes left strategically around the house. Each step felt like a chess move, calculated and precise. I told myself it was justice, not cruelty, but deep down I knew the line between the two was thinner than I cared to admit. Over the next few weeks, my campaign of manipulation gained momentum. James started questioning Sophia's loyalty, his once trusting demeanor replaced with suspicion. One evening he confronted her about why she always seemed to need alone time with Henry during their family gatherings. Sophia, caught off guard, fumbled for an explanation, her usual confidence faltering under his scrutiny. Watching her squirm gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction, though it was short-lived. The guilt crept in later, whispering reminders of who I used to be, a woman who valued honesty and integrity above all else. But I pushed those thoughts aside, telling myself this was war and wars required sacrifices. Meanwhile, Henry grew increasingly distant, retreating further into himself as the tension escalated. He stopped defending Sophia, instead choosing silence whenever accusations flew. At first I thought this meant he regretted his actions, that maybe there was hope for us yet. But then I overheard him talking to Maggie on the phone one night, his voice heavy with resignation. "She's changed," he murmured. "I don't recognize her anymore." His words stung, not because they were untrue, but because they forced me to confront the reality of what I'd become. Still, I couldn't stop, not now, not when I was so close to winning. The final phase of my plan came together faster than I expected. A charity gala hosted by Sophia's real estate firm provided the perfect stage for my grand reveal. Weeks earlier I'd anonymously leaked photos of her and Henry at the lake cabin to several gossip blogs, ensuring maximum exposure. By the night of the event, whispers of their alleged affair were already circulating among attendees. Sophia arrived looking radiant in a sleek black gown, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. I watched from across the room as friends and colleagues exchanged knowing glances, their polite smiles masking judgmental undertones. When the first reporter approached her with questions, Sophia's composure cracked. Her denial sounded hollow, especially when someone held up their phone, displaying grainy but unmistakable images of her and Henry embracing by the water. Panic flashed in her eyes as she turned to flee, only to find James blocking her path. His expression was unreadable, but the disappointment radiating off him was palpable. "Is it true?" he asked quietly, holding up his own phone with the damning evidence displayed prominently. Sophia opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The crowd parted as she ran from the room, leaving behind a trail of shattered reputations and broken trust. In the days following the gala, Sophia disappeared from our lives entirely. She moved out of the city, severing ties with everyone except James, who filed for divorce shortly thereafter. Public opinion turned against her overnight, branding her a homewrecker and social climber. As for Henry, he barely spoke to me, retreating into a shell of guilt and regret. On paper I had won. I'd exposed the truth, dismantled their scheme, and reclaimed what little remained of my dignity. Yet victory tasted bitter, leaving a sour aftertaste that lingered long after the dust settled. Late one night, as I sat alone in the kitchen nursing a cup of tea, I allowed myself to reflect on everything that had happened. Was this really what I wanted? To destroy the people closest to me in pursuit of vengeance? The anger that had fueled me for so long had faded, leaving behind emptiness and exhaustion. I thought about James, whose faith in love and family had been irreparably shaken, and Henry, who looked at me now with a mixture of sadness and fear. Even Sophia, for all her deceit, didn't deserve the public crucifixion she endured. For the first time I wondered if revenge had cost me more than it was worth. The aftermath of the scandal felt like living in a house built on quicksand. Every step I took seemed to pull me deeper into a mire of guilt and regret. James stopped visiting altogether, consumed by legal battles and his own emotional turmoil. He sent terse texts updating me on the divorce proceedings, but they lacked warmth or familiarity. It was as if he couldn't bear to look at me, or maybe he blamed me for everything that had happened. Henry, meanwhile, became a ghost in our home. He moved through the days mechanically, avoiding eye contact and speaking only when necessary. The silence between us was deafening, a constant reminder of how far we'd fallen. Friends and acquaintances began distancing themselves too, wary of being associated with the Marlowe drama. At first I tried to brush it off, telling myself their opinions didn't matter. But loneliness has a way of creeping in unnoticed, filling the spaces where laughter and connection used to thrive. Even Maggie, my closest confidant, grew quieter during our calls. When I finally asked her why, she hesitated before saying, "Ellie, you went too far. What Sophia did was wrong, yes, but what you did, it changed you. And not for the better." Her words cut deeper than I cared to admit. For weeks afterward, I replayed them in my mind, wondering if she was right, if I had crossed a line I could never uncross. As autumn settled over the small town, painting the trees in hues of gold and crimson, I found myself increasingly isolated. The once bustling household now echoed with emptiness, each room a testament to the life I'd lost. I spent hours wandering aimlessly, tidying things that didn't need tidying or flipping through old photo albums, searching for glimpses of happier times. In one picture taken years ago at James's high school graduation, Henry and I stood side by side, arms around each other, smiling so brightly it almost hurt to look at. Where had that couple gone? Had they vanished along with the trust and love we'd shared? One afternoon, while sorting through boxes in the attic, I stumbled upon a letter James had written to us when he was 8 years old. Titled "Why I Love My Family," it was filled with childish scrawls and heartfelt declarations. I love Mommy because she reads me stories. I love Daddy because he teaches me how to fish. I love my family because we are happy together. Tears streamed down my face as I read it, realizing how far we'd strayed from the happiness he described. That night, I sat alone in the dark, clutching the letter like a lifeline, wishing I could turn back time and undo everything I'd done. But some mistakes can't be erased, they can only be endured. Regret is a peculiar emotion. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare or dramatic gestures. Instead, it seeps into your bones slowly, settling there like an uninvited guest who refuses to leave. Mine arrived one rainy morning as I watched Henry shuffle out to the garden, umbrella in hand, to tend to the roses he loved so much. His movements were slow, deliberate, as though every step required monumental effort. I wanted to call out to him to apologize for everything, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I possibly begin to make amends for the damage I'd caused? Later that day, I drove to the lake cabin where Sophia and Henry had met in secret. Sitting by the water's edge, I let the memories wash over me. The laughter, the fights, the quiet moments that had defined my marriage. I realized then that I hadn't just been fighting against Sophia and Henry. I'd been fighting against time itself, against the inevitability of change and loss. Perhaps I'd been so desperate to hold on to what I had that I hadn't noticed how fragile it all was. By the time I returned home, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. Henry was still outside tending to the roses. This time I joined him, wordlessly handing him a pair of pruning shears. We worked in silence, but for the first time in months it didn't feel heavy. It felt like a beginning. Just when I thought I understood the full scope of the betrayal, fate delivered another twist. One that would shatter my perception of truth yet again. A week after my reconciliation attempt with Henry, I received an envelope in the mail containing a USB drive and a note. "You deserve to know the whole story." Curious and slightly uneasy, I plugged the drive into my laptop and opened the files inside. What I found left me reeling. Hidden among documents and spreadsheets were audio recordings. Conversations between Sophia and someone whose voice I didn't recognize at first. In the recordings, Sophia admitted to orchestrating the entire affair narrative as part of a larger scheme. She confessed to manipulating both Henry and me, planting false evidence to create the illusion of an affair. Her ultimate goal? To gain control of the Marlowe estate by driving a wedge between James and his parents. "They're old," she said coldly in one clip. "Once they're out of the picture, James will inherit everything, and I'll make sure he depends on me completely." Listening to her calculated tone sent chills down my spine. All this time I'd believed I was exposing the truth, but the real villain had been playing a game far more sinister than I'd imagined. Armed with this new revelation, I knew I had to act quickly. Though my pride screamed at me to ignore it, to let Sophia rot in the mess she'd created, I couldn't justify staying silent any longer. If I did, I'd be no better than her. I called Henry into the study and played the recordings for him. At first he refused to believe it, convinced I was grasping at straws to salvage our marriage. But as he listened to Sophia's confession, his expression shifted from disbelief to horror. "She used us," he whispered, running a hand through his thinning hair. "She played us like pawns." Together we decided to confront James with the truth. It wasn't easy, he'd already filed for divorce and was emotionally drained, but we owed it to him to set the record straight. Over coffee one chilly morning we laid out the evidence, explaining how Sophia had manipulated all of us. James listened silently, his face unreadable. When we finished, he stared at the table for a long moment before saying, "I don't know what to believe anymore." His response stung, but I understood. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired, even with proof. Though James agreed to investigate further, the rift between us remained palpable. He thanked us for coming forward but made it clear he needed space to process everything. As painful as it was, I respected his decision, knowing I couldn't force forgiveness. Still, sharing the truth brought a measure of relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I was moving toward redemption rather than spiraling further into darkness. Henry and I began rebuilding our relationship cautiously, taking small steps toward healing. We attended counseling sessions, talked openly about our fears and regrets, and even started going on walks together again. It wasn't perfect, there were moments of tension and doubt, but it was progress. Meanwhile, news of Sophia's true intentions leaked to the press, turning public opinion against her once more. Stripped of her reputation and influence, she disappeared entirely, leaving behind a trail of ruined lives, including her own. Yet despite these partial victories, I couldn't shake the feeling that the scars ran too deep to ever fully heal. Some wounds, I realized, leave marks that never fade. Just when I thought the storm had passed, another wave crashed over us. Sophia, desperate to salvage whatever scraps of her life remained, filed a defamation lawsuit against Henry and me. Her lawyers claimed we had fabricated the evidence to ruin her reputation and drive a wedge between her and James. The media frenzy reignited, dragging our family back into the spotlight. Reporters camped outside our house, neighbors whispered behind closed doors, and strangers judged us based on headlines they barely understood. Each day felt like a battle, a relentless assault on what little peace we'd managed to rebuild. The legal proceedings were grueling. Every deposition, every courtroom appearance, forced us to relive the betrayal in excruciating detail. James, torn between loyalty to his parents and lingering resentment toward them, refused to take sides publicly but privately urged us to settle. "It's not worth it," he said during one heated phone call. "You've already won. Why keep fighting?" But settling felt like admitting defeat, like letting Sophia win even after everything she'd done. Still, the financial strain mounted and the emotional toll was unbearable. Nights were spent lying awake, replaying arguments and wondering if justice would ever truly be served. As the trial dragged on, cracks began to form not just within our family but within myself. I found it harder to trust anyone, even Henry. Though we were working to repair our marriage, there were moments when doubt crept in, whispering cruel reminders of his past actions. Was he truly sorry, or was he simply going through the motions to avoid further conflict? These thoughts plagued me, gnawing at the fragile foundation we were trying to rebuild. Even Maggie, who had always been my rock, started pulling away. She stopped returning my calls as frequently, and when we did speak, her tone carried an edge of frustration. "Ellie, you need to let go," she said one evening. "This obsession with proving your innocence, it's eating you alive." Her words stung because they rang true. I was obsessed, consumed by the need to vindicate myself completely. But how could I move forward when the world still doubted me? How could I heal when the wounds kept reopening? The stress of the trial, coupled with months of sleepless nights and endless anxiety, took a visible toll on my health. One morning I woke up feeling unusually weak, my chest tight and my breathing labored. At first I dismissed it as exhaustion, but when the symptoms persisted, Henry insisted I see a doctor. The diagnosis came swiftly and mercilessly: severe hypertension brought on by chronic stress. "If you don't slow down, this could escalate into something much worse," the doctor warned, handing me a prescription for blood pressure medication. I tried to follow her advice, cutting back on caffeine and taking short walks around the neighborhood. But slowing down felt impossible when my mind raced constantly, replaying courtroom scenes and imagining worst-case scenarios. Henry grew increasingly worried, urging me to step away from the case entirely. Your health matters more than anything else, he pleaded one night, gripping my hand tightly. Yet stepping away felt like surrender, and surrender wasn't in my nature. Still, each passing day made it clearer that I couldn't fight forever. My body was breaking under the weight of my choices. On a cold December afternoon, I sat alone in the living room, staring out at the snow-covered yard. The holidays loomed ahead, their cheer dulled by the shadow of the trial and fractured relationships. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to reflect, not just on the events of the past year but on my role in them. Had I become so consumed with revenge that I lost sight of who I was? Was I really any better than Sophia, twisting truths and manipulating lives for personal gain? I thought about James, whose faith in love and family had been shattered. Henry, who looked at me now with a mixture of sadness and regret. And even Sophia, whose downfall had been both deserved and tragic. In seeking justice, I had inadvertently caused harm, to others and to myself. That realization hit me like a freight train, leaving me breathless and hollow. As tears streamed down my face, I resolved to write letters to each member of my family, apologizing for my mistakes and expressing hope for healing. It wouldn't undo the damage, but perhaps it would be a start. By early January, my condition worsened. Another trip to the doctor revealed complications with my heart, likely exacerbated by prolonged stress. You need rest and time to recover, she said gently, though her eyes betrayed concern. Rest sounded appealing, but time felt like a luxury I no longer had. Each heartbeat seemed precious, fragile, a reminder that life was fleeting and unpredictable. I spent my days writing those letters, pouring my soul onto paper in hopes of leaving behind some semblance of closure. To James, I wrote about pride and forgiveness, acknowledging my failures as a mother. To Henry, I expressed gratitude for his patience and love despite everything. And to James and Henry together, I urged them to find joy again, to cherish the bond they shared. One evening, as snowflakes danced outside the window, I collapsed in the hallway, clutching my chest. Henry found me moments later and called an ambulance, but by the time they arrived, I was gone. My final thoughts weren't of anger or regret, they were of hope. Hope that my family would heal, that love would triumph over bitterness, and that someday they might remember me not for my flaws but for the woman I once was. In the weeks following my death, the letters I'd written became a lifeline for my grieving family. James read his multiple times, tears streaming down his face as he absorbed my apology and plea for forgiveness. Henry, too, clung to his letter, finding solace in the words I'd left behind. Together, they decided to honor my memory by mending their fractured relationship. They attended counseling sessions, talked openly about their pain, and slowly began rebuilding the trust that had been broken. At my funeral, held in the small church where Henry and I had married decades earlier, James delivered a heartfelt eulogy. Mom wasn't perfect, he admitted, his voice trembling. But she loved fiercely, sometimes too fiercely. And while her actions hurt us all, I believe she acted out of love, however misguided it may have been. His words resonated deeply, offering a sense of peace to those who mourned me. Even Maggie, sitting quietly in the back pew, nodded in agreement, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Months later, as spring returned to the town, bringing warmth and new beginnings, James and Henry took tentative steps toward reconciliation. They started spending weekends together, fishing at the lake cabin where so much had unraveled. Conversations flowed awkwardly at first, punctuated by long silences, but gradually laughter returned. James confessed that reading my letters had helped him see me, and himself, in a new light. I realize now that Mom was human, he told Henry one afternoon. She made mistakes, yes, but so do we all. Henry nodded, his expression thoughtful. Your mom taught me a lot about forgiveness, he said softly. Not just forgiving others but forgiving yourself. Their bond, though scarred, grew stronger with each passing day. They visited my grave often, leaving flowers and sharing stories about the woman I used to be, the woman they hoped to remember forever. Yet for all the progress they made, the scars of the past lingered. James never fully reconciled with Sophia, though he acknowledged her role in the tragedy without absolving her. Henry, too, carried guilt for his part in the affair narrative, however unwittingly. And though they honored my memory, they couldn't ignore the fact that my actions had set the dominoes falling in the first place. One crisp autumn morning, nearly a year after my passing, James stood alone at my gravesite, rereading the letter I'd written him. Tears blurred his vision as he traced the engraved words on my headstone. Love endures all things. He smiled faintly, knowing I'd chosen those words intentionally. Love had endured, through betrayal, loss, and heartache, but it had come at a cost none of us could have foreseen. As he walked away, clutching the letter tightly, he whispered, "I forgive you, Mom." It was a bittersweet moment, filled with both sorrow and hope, a testament to the enduring complexity of family, love, and forgiveness.